Okay, so we are going to today focus on Messianic rabbis. So we started off our first class was a class on the controversy pre-state over Zionism, whether Zionism was something that the Torah world should get behind or not. And then last week we looked at some rabbis, pre-state religious Zionist leaders who were pragmatic in their approach to Zionism, meaning they saw it as a way of either beating out anti-Semitism or as a way of fulfilling more mitzvot, including living the mitzvah of living in Israel, or the mitzvot that you could only fulfill in the land of Israel. So they saw it as more of a pragmatic approach. Today we're going to look at things from a more messianic approach, more rabbis that were messianic in their approach. So we're gonna talk about Rav Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer and Rav Kook. So those are the big when you talk about as messianic rabbis, messianic Zionist rabbis. Those are the ones that will look at some Torah that makes their approach a little controversial. In my opinion, this is going to be heavily weighed on my opinion here, and then we'll look at how this affects today. This approach really has changed things today, and we're going to spend some time on that. So, I gotta just introduce this a little by telling you that this is I've had my whole life. I've really had a problem with this approach to Zionism. So I have to tell you that this is a very biased class. Last week I felt very comfortable talking about the pragmatic approach because it's the one that I feel at home with. I consider myself a religious Zionist. That's what I am, and I spend countless hours of my life teaching Zionism and researching Zionism. So I think that I have some understanding of Zionism, but I have to tell you, and I mentioned this a little last week, my whole life I was taught religious Zionism only from the Messianic approach. All my teachers that were Zionists were Messianic Zionist rabbis, and it's really taken over, especially here in Israel. It is the Messianic approach has completely taken over the religious Zionist world. You will, I mean, it's everywhere. I just want to make sure you can see the slide behind me that talks about the introduction. Tova, you're one of the only people I can see his face. So just give me a thumbs up if you can see the slide that says introduction. Yes? Okay, great. Good. Just want to make sure it's working. I had to tell you, like the if I got up in my shul here in Israel, and I spoke in front of the shul, and my Dvar Torah was about the Medina Israel, and I did not take it from a messianic approach. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. If I did not do that, and let's say I went opposite, and I said, I don't. I told them what I really believe. I don't take the messianic approach. This isn't something I feel. I don't think I'd ever be invited to speak again. I think that they would just say, "Yeah, Tova's laughing, but it's really true." This is. And it's interesting. Like I'm just gonna open up here because why not? But when I was choosing a high school for my son, one of the first conditions that I was looking for was a school that did not teach the messianic approach to Zionism. I didn't want him to be in an anti-Zionist school, but I did not want him to be because I feel so uncomfortable with it, and I felt so uncomfortable with this approach that for years I didn't even consider myself a Zionist. I was an anti-Zionist, but I just felt I wasn't a secular Zionist, and since this is the only approach to Zionism that was out there was Messianic Zionism. I didn't feel comfortable with that. So I just felt, okay, I guess there's no home for me in Zionism. And I mentioned this last week a little until I started reading people like that we learned about last week, Rabbi Reines, and I said, okay, this is who I can feel comfortable with. So when we look at this, so now again, let's just remind ourselves. I do this every time, but just remind ourselves what the definition that we're working with for Zionism, just so we know, right? That Zionism is again the Jewish people have a right to self-determination in their historical land of Israel. And the reason why we have to keep repeating this is because there is no official definition of Zionism. So if we don't, and I don't want anybody to be on the wrong page here. So, or on a different page, shouldn't say wrong, a different page than the one that we're working with. So that way, now again, Anybody has anything that they want to object to? I love, there's always three types of questions that I tell my students. There's three types of questions you can have in a class. The first one is, I just wasn't paying attention. Can you just repeat the point? That's fine. Second one is, yeah, I didn't understand something. Could you, I didn't understand something because of this. It didn't make sense to me. And the third type of question is, I completely disagree with you, and let me tell you why. And I enjoy the third question the best because that's the one that gets me thinking. The second one makes me, repeat my point and figure out how to say it in a different way. But if you have any objections, so then I would love to hear them. Okay, so let's just ask this question to open up. What is Messianic Zionism? Right? When we talk about Messianic Zionism, so what is it exactly that we're referring to? So this I open up if anybody wants to tell me what they think Messianic Zionism is. In their mind, again, there's no right or wrong answers to these things because these are things that don't have like official or standard definitions. But do you have anybody here want to share their idea of what they think Messianic Zionism is? Don't all scream at once because then it's like you just can't hear anything. So, okay, so we're not going to go. So I'll show you just one area that we're used to where we see Messianic Zionism, and that is in. I'm just trying to find the slide for it. It's like I think this is it here. Okay, is the prayer that we say. I have this in English because it's just easier. The Misha Berach that we say on usually most synagogues that I know of say this on Shabbat morning. Especially in America, they say it Shabbat morning. In Israel also, depending on where you pray. But this is the tefillah that the Rabbanut, the chief rabbin in Israel, wrote. This is Rav Herzog actually wrote it, the grandfather of the current president of Israel. So he's the one that wrote this, and he has a phrase in this prayer that is the one that's somewhat controversial. Okay, and when I say controversial, I don't think anybody on this class is going to think that's controversial, but in certain quarters in the Jewish world, I think it's incredibly controversial. Excuse me. Excuse me. So, okay. Uh, Sorry. So the line that I'm referring to in Hebrew is Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, which in English here in this is in the if you look in the second line, it says that yeah, I'll start from the beginning. Our Father in heaven, Rock and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, the first manifestation of the approach of our redemption. Right? Meaning that the state of Israel, as this prayer states, is the first step to a messianic era, to our geula, to our redemption. And that was not a line that was accepted by everybody, right? For many people, they objected to this line. Now, where did the line come from, right? Where does this line stem from? That all of a sudden we don't know when the Gula is going to be. We don't know where the redemption is going to be, and it's not like we have a statement from our rabbis that say the ultimate redemption, the messianic era, is going to come when a state of Israel is founded, and it'll be in the following ways, and it matched up perfectly exactly. So that didn't happen. So Messianic Zionism, not to be confused with Messianic Judaism, which is, not Chabad, but like Christianity, right? Which is right that they're the Christian like Jews for Jesus type people. That we're not talking about that at all. Just to make sure we're clear about that. But Messianic Zionism is where the belief is that the state of Israel is the first step to the Gula, to the ultimate redemption, as we're going to have a Mashiach, we're going to have a Messianic era. It's going to be amazing, and we're not there yet. We know that's for sure, because not all the Jews are here in Israel. That's going to happen in the Messianic era. We're going to have a third temple. It's not there. Saw it this morning. Wasn't there. Maybe they've built it since my commute to work and back and forth, but I don't think so. And there's many things that are going to happen in the Messianic era. We're going to have peace. Definitely don't have that. So those factors aren't there. But declaring the state of Israel as the first step towards redemption. Now, it's a somewhat controversial statement because many people look at the state of Israel and say, "Well, hold on a second, it's not even a Torah entity." I don't like using the word religious because religious has different connotations, but the state of Israel, as much as it supports Torah and as much as it helps Torah, I love quoting the statistic that there was never as much Torah learned in the history of the Jewish people as there was today in Israel. Today holds the record, right? And it broke it from yesterday, and tomorrow it'll break it. And who is the greatest sponsor of Limud Torah, of Torah study in Israel? It's the state of Israel. It supports the yeshivas, it supports the schools, right? It's not like in America where you have these humongous tuition payments that have to cover the cost of the schools. Here, it's public education is Torah education. Not every school, but if you could choose to send your kid to a public school that teaches Torah, that teaches Torah Judaism. So that's the one way of looking at the state of Israel is very positive from a Torah perspective. But at the same time, the state of Israel also encourages, sponsors the breaking of the Torah, right? In many, many different areas. So it's very hard for people to wrap their heads around, wait a minute, you tell me the first steps of a Messianic era are going to come about with people breaking the Torah and violating the Torah? That's very difficult to understand. But that is a stream of Messianic Zionism. And so let's get right into it. Let's get this. The first rabbi we're going to look at is Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer. Okay, so he
Can I ask you a
lived.
question?
Sure, of course.
You just made a statement that said that the state of Israel also sponsors, I don't have the exact words, it sponsors
I
things,
said violations of the Torah.
violations of the Torah. Could you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so you have for instance, I'll give you an example. You have in certain cities public transportation on Shabbat, right? So that means that there are tax shekalim being used to subsidize, right? These aren't private entities. So, for instance, in the city of Haifa, the buses run on Shabbat in Haifa, and those are public entities. Those buses, right? They're subsidized by the state. Um, the state allows non-kosher food, right? So and so that's also there. So it's not that I think it's a gross exaggeration to say the state of Israel is anti-Torah. I think that's absurd. But it's also not really consistent with fully with the truth to say that the state of Israel is fully on board with the Torah. So that's what I
Okay,
would
so
say.
it's not, in other words, it's not a halachic system. The state of Israel isn't bound to the halacha.
It's definitely not bound to the halacha, for sure not, right? That's for sure. And it would be very confusing if it was, because we'd have you think the Knesset debates are bad now, but yeah, so it would be very difficult. But it's not. So people struggle with the idea that a state that does not follow the Torah, that's not a halachic state, could really be the first step to the redemption. Like how could that be? So.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's the struggle. So that's the struggle that people have. We love to put things in extremes. The Jewish people love the black and white lack of nuance. So we love to say, no, it is a Torah state. No, it's not a Torah state. It's not true. It's somewhere in the middle. I don't know how we judge this. It's like the state of Israel is like every Jew, right? The state of Israel is like every Jew. It's very hard to say that this Jew is consistent with the Torah and this Jew isn't consistent with the Torah because every Jew does mitzvos and every Jew does averos, right? So that's why we let God judge. Mishpat Elohim Hu, right? So, but it is very difficult to say that the state of Israel. I shouldn't say it's difficult. It's difficult for some people to say that the state of Israel is a first step to a messianic era and to our gula. But there are rabbis, and we're going to look at them right now, and they are the predominant thought among religious Zionism that sees the state of Israel as the first step. So Rav Kalischer, who was in Europe, lived the same time as Rav and was again predates Herzl. Right, that's what I like to say. We had it first, right? Quoting Rabbi Yudin, right? The Torah world had Zionism before Herzl, right? Herzl, and by the way, one of the rabbis that we're not talking about is Rav Alkalai, who was a rabbi, a Sephardic rabbi, in Europe, in Serbia. And he really talked about Zionism. It didn't fit so much in what we were talking about here, but it's a shame if we don't mention him. But Herzl's grandfather used to go to his classes. Like I used to go to his shiurim. So little known fact. But that's so these rabbis were predated Herzl's ideas of Zionism. And then when Zionism came about, we discussed this last time. When Zionism came about, they sort of jumped on and said, "Okay, this is something that we could get on board with. This is what we've been talking about." So Rav Kalischer was one of them, and he talked about the fact that we've got to get Mashiach going. We've got to start doing our part here. We can't just sit there and wait. Right? We've been waiting for so long, and we assume that like something's going to happen, some miracle is going to happen, a man's going to come on a white donkey, and then we're all going to find out about it around the world, and that's going to be Mashiach. And his approach was, no, we have to do something. We have to show that either we merit Mashiach or that we want Mashiach and in action, not just that we say at the end of our Pesach Seder, Shana Haba Yerushalayim, but that we actually like start going to Yerushalayim and we start moving to Yerushalayim. Let's start making Yerushalayim a city of Torah, and that's what he was calling for in the mid 1800s. We should do this, and then Mashiach would come. So he saw this return to Israel as opposed to the rabbis that we talked about last week. He saw the return to Israel as the jump start, you could say, of a messianic era. We've got to get this going. We've got to get this moving. Let's go. And the first step is we've got to get to Eretz Yisrael. We get to Eretz Yisrael. Now, by the way, you should know. I think we might see this at the end, so I apologize if I'm jumping the gun here a little. But one of the qualifications for Mashiach is that he brings the Jewish people back to Israel. So you can look at that and say, okay, I'll wait for Mashiach. When Mashiach calls me and he says, okay, now it's time to buy your tickets, then I'll go. But until then, I'll wait here. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Or you could say that no, we should all get the ground ready, ready to go. So that's how Rav Kalischer was pushing. He was pushing for people that they should start the process, and that process would be by definition a messianic process. So he wrote books about this. He wrote Svarim about this, and really started getting people thinking about a messianic approach to Eretz Yisrael and starting getting this going. And he wrote, as a translation, obviously, to write his book in English, he wrote, "The redemption of Israel will come about through the desire of the Jews to settle in Palestine. God will begin to send his divine spirit to the leaders of the nations, and they will allow Israel to return to its land." Right? So that's when it's us. It's on us. Right? The Geula doesn't come about by some sort of metaphysical, miraculous type of event, and then we all know, oh, Mashiach's here. Now we should get going. No, that's not how it happens. It's we have to go ahead and do this. And the first step to bringing Mashiach is not it's part of the not tefillin and not Shabbos and not kashrus. It's not all these different mitzvos. It's getting to Eretz Yisrael. Once we get to Eretz Yisrael, we start moving there as a people. Then we'll show a seriousness and a commitment to the fact that we actually want a messianic era, and then we can start saying that these will be the first steps of a messianic era. That's how Rav Kalischer approached it, and today everybody listening to this, I assume, sits there and says, "Okay, this is not such a novelty," right? Because we hear this all the time, but we hear it all the time because Rav Kalischer was the guy that got this started, right? So we have to recognize the fact that if we took a time machine back to the early 1800s and we start talking about Mashiach, people would look at us very funny. They'd really look at us funny. They'd be like, "What are you talking about, Mashiach?" Nobody talked about Mashiach. This was a very just to give an example from a common book that we look at. So the Shulchan Aruch never mentions Mashiach, basically, just in passing. And the Rambam, when he discussed, it's the final two chapters of a 14-volume work. So it's not looked upon as, it was not the main focus. All of a sudden, people start talking about, okay, we can start getting this going. We can start having Mashiach. So all of us are post that. We're Monday morning quarterbacks. We're looking at this as after the fact, But this Rav Kalischer to go ahead and say this when people opened up his sefer and he started talking about let's bring Mashiach. People looked at this and said, this is new. This is very, very new. They liked it. That's why I caught on. but they still saw it as very new. Now, just historically, before we jump to the next great rabbi, we have to recognize historically what's happening at this point. Now, the world starts buying into nationalism. They start looking away from imperialism at this point, and start looking away from colonialism, and they start saying, okay, let's let people have their own homelands. And Herzl starts the movement of Zionism under that banner. So now rabbis have to make a choice, right? Rabbis have to make a choice. Am I with this guy, Herzl, with this new movement, or am I against it? And that was our first class. One of the people that, probably one of the main people, that started saying, I'm into this is Rav Kook. Now there are two Rav Kooks, just so we know, and you don't get confused. There's this Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak Kook, and then there's Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. They're father and son. Rav Tzvi Yehuda is the son. And Rav Avram Yitzchak Kook, ironically, never got to see the state of Israel be established. He passed away beforehand. Rav Kook Rav Kook lived. He was alive for Herzl, but he really got involved in this movement post Herzl. He started learning, his life started in Volozhin, in the famous yeshiva of Volozhin, and he was a student of the Netziv, and then he moved to Palestine. He became, one of the what he had so much love for the Jewish people. The Jewish people loved him so much. He was appointed the chief rabbi of Palestine, the first chief rabbi that they had probably since, I guess, Rabbi Yonatan ben Zakkai. I guess Yochanan ben Zakkai, I guess, was the last one. I don't know. It's a good question. Who was before Rav Kook? But it was a long time. We're talking about like a couple thousand years, maybe not a couple thousand, but close to it. That Rav Kook was the chief rabbi. Now he had to say he had a rival is mischaracterizing the relationship, because they were very close, and they actually went around Eretz Yisrael together. But I don't even know how to call him, the opposing rabbi, the Eda Charedis, which was the Haredi community. So that was Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, was the other Rav in Eretz Yisrael. There was a lot of Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, a lot of rabbis, but Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld was the head of the Eda Charedis. He was not into Zionism, as the Eda Charedis is still not into Zionism today. But on a personal level, Rav Kook and Rav Sonnenfeld were very close. Unfortunately, their like followers tried to make, as it always happens, tried to make drama and say that they were against it. It was not true. They loved each other. They respected each other. Rav Kook, even if you don't agree with Rav Kook's philosophy when it comes to whether his Torah philosophy or his Zionism philosophy, you're out of the picture if you think that he wasn't a Torah scholar and a great Torah scholar. It's just nonsense for anybody to say that. And the Haredi community, which again was the one that did not accept him, accepted his Torah scholarship. They might not have agreed with a lot of his positions, but they agreed that he was a Torah scholar. So anytime, if I just want to make sure everybody's clear on this, if you see anybody that says, "Oh, Rav Kook," and they try to cancel Rav Kook or negate Rav Kook or try to claim that he wasn't as big of a scholar as his followers think, they're wrong. Everybody accepted him during when he was alive, and he didn't, and nothing changed after he passed away. His Torah only grew. So that was Rav Kook. Now, Rav Kook took in his Torah learning, he took a very different approach than almost anybody before him. I really think this is true. He took a much more metaphysical approach. And I have to be honest, I'm going to say something that's going to sound really insane, but it's really true. I've never understood anything that I've learned from Rav Kook. And I've sat down with his students and his son's students, and I've begged them to try to explain to me. There's a man in our community who's one of the foremost translators of Rav Kook's works. I don't understand it. My brain is not wired this way. But a tremendous respect for Rav Kook. And again, you're just an absolute arrogant fool. And I'm sorry to speak so bluntly if you don't think that Rav Kook was a great Torah scholar. But Rav Kook was really the one, really the one who came about and said, "This Zionism, this is it. This is going to be the start of the Messianic era." And he came up with this entire framework of how secular Jews who did not follow the Torah fit into the Messianic process. So the reason why I spent so much time at the beginning of this class stressing the controversy over how could you have beginning of a Messianic era started by Jews who violate the Torah is because now that you understand how great the objection was to that, you can understand how novel it was when Rav Kook not only said that this is not a problem, but this is part of the Messianic process. Part of the Messianic process is going to involve secular Jews, as it does not always have to be the Jews that are Torah observant. That is not true. Part of the way that it was always supposed to be a Messianic era was always supposed to be with secular Jews. This is why people like Rav Sonnenfeld objected to this, and they said, "Look, we you can't have Jews that violate the Torah be part of the redemptive process. That's just not doesn't make any sense." But Rav Kook really felt this way, and just let's read one quote from Rav Kook here. And there's so many that we could choose, but it says the land of Israel is not something external, not an external national asset, a means to an end of collective solidarity and the strengthening of the nation's existence. The land of Israel is bound up with the nation of Israel, with a deep inner bond, with the power of its innermost essence. And this bond is the source of the light of the redemption that is beginning to unfold. Right? So just to be sensitive to what Rav Kook is saying here, Rav Kook was very into like I don't know if you would call it the the symbolism or I don't know, but this idea of light. He was very into light, or, and so here he focuses on the light of the redemption. If you look through works before him, you're not going to find these ideas of or. Or is like that's a very like Rav Kook type of approach to things. But he felt that this is he was living through and starting to see the beginning of the Messianic era. And it was coming about through the return to Israel, the settlement of the land of Israel, the growth of the land of Israel, the Jewish people in the land of Israel. This is what he felt. This is a clear sign of a messianic era, and that was something that he felt very very strongly about, and his followers took this to the nth degree. And his son took this to the nth degree, to where his son, in a remarkable speech, I mean, it's remarkable, a couple of weeks before the Six-Day War. So we're talking about in the spring of 1967, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook said, and that just to make sure we understand the history of the time, this is where the Jewish people did not have control of, let's say, the Golan Heights and the Gaza Strip and Judea and Samaria, what we call the West Bank today in certain circles. So the Jewish people did not have control of that area. And Rav Tzvi Yehuda said, "Look, we can't say that we're going to have Mashiach until we have control of these areas, but very very soon we're going to have control of the areas." In retrospect, everyone said, "Well, that was a prophecy." Nobody knew then that we would take over these areas. I've done tons of research into what the experts were saying was going to happen in the Six-Day War before the Six-Day War. I have yet to find anybody that says that Israel's going to win the war and take over all these areas. Nobody was saying that. I don't know how Rav Yehuda was so confident in saying that. I don't know, maybe throughout his life he said many things, and most of them didn't come true, but nobody talks about the things that didn't come true. They only talk about the things that did come true. But I don't know. I don't know enough about his speeches, but he definitely saw him and his father and their followers and the yeshiva today. There's a yeshiva named after Rav Kook where they study, Rav Kook's works in the entrance to Yerushalayim. America has a Rav Kook, and you look, and that yeshiva all their followers firmly believe that what we are living through now are the first steps of a messianic era, meaning that when we are in a full messianic era, we're going to like take a retrospect look back and say, when did this all start? And the answer is going to be it all started with the start of Zionism. So that's how they looked at it and said, okay, and now we have to act accordingly. That we are in a messianic era. We're going to talk about that soon. So that's how they view things. And this is something that they felt very strongly about, and their followers feel very strongly about. And now it's important to note that this is the predominant thought in religious Zionism today. Is this Messianic Zionism? I'm always shocked that Mizrahi, which was started by Rav Reines, who was not, we saw last week, was not a Messianic Zionist, did not talk about Mashiach in his writings to the extent that say Rav Kook did. But Mizrahi is very much along the lines of Rav Kook today. It is not they fully embraced Rav Kook's philosophy. And next week we'll learn about Rav Soloveitchik's approach, who was also very a leader of Mizrahi, and Rav Soloveitchik was not into Rav Kook's ideas. Did not teach them the same way. We'll put it that way. And yet Mizrahi today, as well as the rest of religious Zionism, follows Rav Kook's way of thinking. Very difficult to go into any religious Zionist yeshiva and not see what they call the white shas. You know, the white shas is Rav Kook's writings have been published by his yeshiva. Merkaz Harav has their own publishing house, a very very popular publishing house, and they publish Rav Kook's writings in a set, and the binding is all done with white covers. So they call it the white shas because it's like 25 books, and on a shelf it's just all white, and they call it like the white shas, like a Gemara set looks like. So it's very hard to find not to find any religious Zionist institution today, and whether you're talking about in Israel, in America, South America, North America, wherever you're looking at a religious Zionism, a religious Zionist type of institution, and not find it pervading with the thought that we are in a Messianic era. In fact, I challenge anybody here to walk up to your local Zionist Orthodox rabbi and say to them, I'm not so sure it's going to be a Messianic era, and have them not be skeptical about your Zionism, and say, well, maybe you're not really, so much of a Zionist. So that's I once had in one of the shows that I was a rabbi at. I once, expressed some skepticism about whether or not we're in a Messianic era. Just express the opinion as I'm doing now. Not definitively saying yes or no, just express the skepticism. And I remember a congregant walking up to me and saying, I was furious and saying that he's going to call the OU on me. So I said, okay. I mean, like, I don't work for the OU. You can call the OU if you want. I don't know how, there's no body that controls all rabbis in the Orthodox world. So, and this is for sure not going to be a violation, but that's how pervasive it is. So, okay. So that's those are the two rabbis that we're going to look at. Now let's look at and you'll see why I'm very biased. I told you I'm very biased here. If a different rabbi was giving this class, so I think that they would have been more critical of last week's class and more advocating this week's class. But let's just look at the Rambam and Mashiach, and you'll see the doubt that I have. And again, I apologize if this speaks to you, then great, and just ignore the next couple of minutes. But the Rambam says as follows. This is the Rambam on his writings on Mashiach. He writes that in the future, the Messianic king will arise and renew the Davidic dynasty, restoring it to its initial sovereignty. He will build the temple and gather the dispersed of Israel. And then in his days, the observance of all the statutes will return to their previous state. We will offer sacrifices, observe the sabbatical and jubilee years according to all their particulars as described by the Torah. Today we keep Shemitah, but we don't keep Shemitah the way it's supposed to be done. What I mean by that is we don't keep it according to the Torah laws. We keep it according to rabbinic law because we haven't fulfilled all the qualifications that we need to keep Shemitah according to Torah law. So when the Rambam says, we're going to keep the sabbatical year, then so you say, oh, we do that already, but we don't actually do that. And Yovel, we for sure don't do. Anyone who does not believe in him or does not await his coming denies not only the statements of other prophets, but those of the Torah and Moses, our teacher. A person should not occupy himself with the Agadot and homiletics concerning these and similar matters, nor should he consider them as essentials, for studying them will neither bring fear or love of God. Right? So this is the Rambam's very critical of people who focus a lot of their Torah observance on Mashiach and on a Messianic era, which is seemingly what this strain of religious Messianic Zionism does spend a lot of time on this. Similarly, one should not try to determine the appointed time for Mashiach's coming. Our sages declared, may the spirits of those who attempt to determine the time of Mashiach's coming expire. Rather, one should await and believe in the general conception of the matter as explained. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, it's not frequently that I quote him, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he focused so much on Mashiach and had so much of his movement focusing on Mashiach, when they brought up this Rambam, and a lot of people would challenge him with this, he would say that was then when we were so far away from Mashiach. It didn't make any sense to talk about it. But now that we're so close, we need to start getting people ready and we need to start talking about it. And I think a lot of the religious Zionists would take the same approach, that they would say, look, it made sense. They're stuck in the shtetl in a ghetto in Poland. So talking about Mashiach didn't make really that much sense. People had to spend time thinking about other things in order to improve on their service of God. But nowadays, when we're so close and we have the state of Israel, so now we have to start preparing for a messianic era, and that's why we need to go ahead and spend some more time thinking about Mashiach and calculating. But I'm not sure if the Rambam came around today what he would say. I don't think he would get on board with the focus on Mashiach as it is today. But again, that's my opinion, and you can definitely leave it. You do not have to agree with me. Okay, we looked at the beginning of this quote last week, and I left out the second part of the quote. So that's why it says pragmatic religious Zionism. So now let's compare last week's class with this week's class. From this professor's writings, I thought this was really keyed in on it. He says pragmatic religious Zionists tend to be more inclined to accept modernity, secular studies, the changing status of women, and see the establishment of Israel, first of all, as a means of securing Jewish survival. Right? That's what we saw last week. Okay, now we're adding in this week the second part of the quote. However, the Messianic stream saw the state of Israel through the prism of redemption and interpreted the results of the Six-Day War in a religious fundamentalist manner. At least at its spiritual leadership levels, the Messianic stream has become dominant in advancing the leading the settlement effort and the education system. Right, and that is for sure true. Right? Israel's settlement movement. I live in a settlement. I can tell you the whole settlement thinks that we're like right here, ready for Mashiach, and they also believe very much so that in the education of most religious Zionist schools in Israel and in America, for that matter, they teach that we're at the start of the redemptive process. They definitely feel that way, and that's for sure true. I don't know of many modern Orthodox synagogues in the United States that don't say that the state of Israel is rashis michat gvulotenu. I don't know many synagogues that leave that phrase out. I know I've heard. I don't know this for sure. I've heard that Rabbi Dr. Norman Lambs. That's how I heard that he was against saying it. That he wouldn't say it. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what I heard. But definitely, I don't know of any modern Orthodox synagogues in the United States and in Israel that doesn't say that line. And now again, the more yeshivish in America and the more Haredi yeshivas, they're not going to skip that line. They skip the whole prayer, right? So they're not the whole state of Israel. They call into question again. That's not this week. That was our first class about whether or not Zionism is acceptable according to the Torah. Okay, nobody has any questions, any objections to what I'm saying. This doesn't, I could be a lot more controversial and try to offend people more if that'll get people more interested. But so far, no. Okay, we'll have a shorter class this week because we don't have any questions. We had one. David asked one, but no, since then, nothing. Okay.
My suggestion is don't tempt us.
No, I want to be. Let bring it on. That's what makes classes interesting. Lectures are never. I don't like lectures. I don't like giving lectures. I don't like attending lectures. I like discussions. It's so much better. But okay.
Okay,
Um,
we're doing fine.
okay. So thank you. So now the question becomes, okay, we have in the Gemara, we have a question that's often asked as my nafkamina, what's the difference? Right? What's the difference if we call this a messianic era or we don't call it a messianic era? What's the difference if we take an approach that is like more along the lines of what we saw Rabbi Rainis, that's more pragmatic, or we take a Rav Kook approach? Who cares? Right? One day Mashiach will come. Hopefully it'll be today, and we'll ask him, was the state of Israel part of this or just a coincidence? And then he'll tell us, and then okay, what's the difference? We're not doing anything different. You say the whole difference comes down to whether we say 4 words in a prayer for the state of Israel or not. What's the difference? So there actually is a big difference, a very large difference. It didn't have to be this way. It's not necessary to have this difference, but what you do find is difference. I'm going to give one example, leaving out the institution and the person. But I will tell you that I worked in a very I've worked in like 50 different schools. So and I've never been fired. So don't think that I keep getting fired. I just like teaching in a lot of different places. So one of the places that I once taught at, the one of the alumni of the yeshiva he was studying in what's called the Hesder type of arrangement, where for those unfamiliar, the Hesder is you sign up for you're 18 years old, you graduate high school, and in Israel you have to go to the army. And instead of going to the army straight away for 2 years and 8 months, which is the current service, you actually sign up for 5 years. But of those 5 years, you're going to the first year and a half until Purim of your second year, you're going to be studying in yeshiva. Then you serve another year and a half, basically, in the army, and then you come back for a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half in the Beit Midrash, for ending off your service in the army. Now, all 5 years are considered you're a soldier in the army. From the moment that you start, and all the laws apply as if you're a soldier in the army. Hesder is not considered like army light or anything like that. For all 5 years, you are considered a soldier in the army. So now you have and this is a real case. So I hope you find this somewhat fascinating. And this case happens all the time, as I'll explain. Um, in the Israeli army, the way it works is you have your regular foot soldiers or your tank soldiers or whoever it is, whatever unit you're serving in, and every like 6 or 7 soldiers, depending on what unit, has a commander. Okay, now the commander is like 19. He's not. We're not talking about, or she's 19. We're not talking about like the commander. Sometimes you might think that this is like an older person. This is not. The person's been in the army for just a little longer than the people under them. Okay, so they're in charge of, and that's a commander. Now, in order to become a commander, you have to do, let's say, the first 7 months in the army, and then they take the people that they think are great, and they say, "Would you like to go into a commander's course?" Now, if you enter the commander's course, so then you have to take some extra time in the army, and then you become a commander. And okay, and then but again, this is they offer this to so many people to be the commander because they know 60, 75% of the people are going to say no. So they offer it to a ton of people, and then some people say yes, and most people say no to the offer. Thank you very much. I'll do my time in the army and I'm done. That's it. I don't want to spend any more time in the army. Now, when they ask a Hesder student if they want to take the commander's course, what happens with the Hesder student is that they're signed up for 5 years anyway. So what they're offering them is more time in the field as a soldier, but that takes off your time in the Beit Midrash at the end of your service. And this becomes a real Torah question, a halachic question, a legal question. Should you serve as a commander in the army and spend more time in fighting in the army? Again, it doesn't have to be fighting. You could be behind a desk, but should you spend more time, in the army itself, or at the expense of your time in the Beit Midrash? Now, let's take a regular case in the Beit Midrash, and let's say somebody runs into the Beit Midrash and says, there's an elderly person. They need help getting up the stairs. So should you stop your Torah learning? We don't stop Torah learning, right? We're not supposed to stop our Torah learning. So should I stop my Torah learning and help the person up the stairs? The answer in halacha is very simple. If nobody else is doing it, then yes, of course I should. And right, any mitzvah, doesn't matter what it is, I stop my Torah learning. If there's somebody else, 15 people get up to run to help the old person, I don't have to get up, right? There's no reason for me. I'm not doing anything by getting up. I'm not going to be there first. There's no reason. That's how it works. If you apply that same principle to our question in the army, and they say to you, "Would you like to be a commander in the army?" and you look around and say, "Okay, they need, let's say, 35 people, and they're going to get the 35 people, no problem. They're offering so many people." So you would think that the answer to that would be, I don't have to be a commander in the army, and therefore I should return to the Beit Midrash. It shouldn't come at the expense of my Torah learning. That's the straight answer. Now, you might say, wait, hold on a second. There are other calculations to be made here. You might say that the Israeli army to serve as a commander in the army means you're going to be doing more for the state of Israel, more for the Jewish people. Okay, those are all different calculations. The rabbi that I saw, and this is a great rabbi who I respect tremendously. He's a Rosh Yeshiva of this yeshiva. It's a very well established yeshiva. He's a very well established Torah scholar. He said to the person, that you should take the commander course, even though it will come at the expense of your service in the of your time in the Beit Midrash, and you should do this. Why? And now listen to his reasoning. And when I heard this, I ran up to him. When the soldier came over to me to tell me what he had said, I ran over to the Rosh Yeshiva to say, "Whoa, hold on a second, I got to hear this myself." So I'm telling you this firsthand now. His answer was because we're in a messianic era, things change. Things change in the Messianic era. And therefore, the common halacha, which would be if somebody else is going to do this, if you would go to the army, the person that offered you to take this commander course and say, listen, if you tell me you need me, I'm the first guy to sign up. If you tell me you don't need me and somebody else is going to be there, I'm going back to the Beit Midrash. Whatever you tell me, I'm going to follow. So that I'd say, okay, that I understand. But here, the answer was given differently. It was because we're in a Messianic era, things change. That was very strange to me because I have a lot of books. Well, right now I have the screen in front of me. If I would show you my background, I've got a lot of books in my library down here in my house, here in my study. And you're not going to find that answer in any one of them, not the books that I have on my shelves. So I said to him, I said, where do you get this from? I don't understand. And he said, I'm a student of Rav Kook. He was a student of Rav Kook, of the second Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook. And he said, this is how Rav Kook taught that when you're in a messianic era, things change. What's fascinating about that answer is that one of the principles that we see so often in the writings of the Rambam and the writings of so many great Torah scholars that wrote about the Messianic era is they wrote that nothing changes in the Messianic era. Halacha stays the same. So this answer is I find it very interesting, and when I say interesting, curious. And when I say curious, I say odd. I found it very strange. I still don't understand it today. It's been about 10 years since I heard it. I still don't understand it. But this is when you talk about the difference between what's the difference if we call this a Messianic era, we don't call it a Messianic era. If we look at the state of Israel as part of the Messianic process, or we don't, we take a more Rav Kook approach as opposed to a Rav Reines approach. What's the difference? There are differences in the state of Israel today. You will find this in the Torah world that there are very, very big differences. And it's not just an academic question or a theological question. It has become a very, very practical question in the way that people approach the state of Israel, the Israeli army, and then it's not just how they view the state of Israel and do they view us as being part of Messianic era, or we'll wait and see what happens. That's the difference. So I hope that that explains to you the differences of things. I hope that you that talked to you and spoke to you and you saw it, and yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this class. And if you have any questions before I go, happy to take them now, or objections to anything that I've said. No? Okay, we'll end here. I wish us, Toby, you want to say something?
Yeah, Chag Sameach v'Kasher.
To you as well. Thank you very much.
תודה רבה, תודה רבה.
Simcha.
Same here, same here. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach to everybody. All the best. See you after Pesach.
Thank you, Rabbi.